And continue now with the series of lessons that count down to the tribulation. Now, we have dealt with the physical signs of his coming. We've shown that according to Luke 21 and the message of Christ, we're not only now in the final generation, but we're in the last year of that final generation. We can look for climatic things to happen. Judgment comes, then the wrath of God. Now, the long-suffering of God governs everything. I'm not about to be saying that Christ must come this year, but I am saying that judgment has already been pronounced. The wrath of God will always follow. The long-suffering of God sometimes allows men time. But we come now to this lesson, the preoccupation with the demonic. What we're showing, the spiritual signs that indicate that an end time has come. Now, there have been many end times come in the Bible. Redemption has drew near many, many times. And Jesus told us that there were certain things that indicated that an end time had come, and that we could lift up our heads and rejoice. Now, if all you can see is the visible, there'll not be a lot of rejoicing in your life. But if you can see beyond the visible, you know these are the things that tell us that Christ is about to come. Now, we've gone through, we've shown that the false prophet, who he is, what he is, identified him, not as the absolute person yet, but who he'll be when he comes. And we've demonstrated how a world church is here now functioning, operating. That harlot system is here full-blown in our time. We've gone through here in Romans 1:21 through 32 that we're going to read right now, the three give-ups of God, showing that we're beyond that third give-up of God. And as the days of Noah were, this was a time when Paul wrote about here in Romans chapter 1, the days of Noah, those pre-flood days. We saw the give-ups of God, and the final give-up was a reprobate mind, and after that came the flood. Well, one of the signs of those times, there was a preoccupation with the demonic. That's always true in every end time. Now, Christ has come to his church many times. We believe now he's about to come for us. Now, we're going to read again from Romans chapter 1, verse 21 through 22. We've read these about 3 times, but it's important. These are the most graphic scriptures and language of the Bible, from believer to a reprobate in 11 short verses. So we read, now reaching back beyond the flood, God shows us now the pattern leading to judgment. All of this we have, the give-ups of God. So reading here from Romans chapter 1, verse 21 through 32, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imagination, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Romans 1:21. Now, it is with the imagination that we now concern ourselves. Jesus said, as the days of Noah were, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Matthew 24:37. Now, this age will end in the same manner as the first age ended. The end is always contained in the beginning and always returns there. Now, much has been said and written concerning the days of Noah, the marrying, giving in marriage, eating, drinking, violence of that time. But there's one outstanding truth that marked the age of Noah that's rarely mentioned, and yet is probably the most important feature. The imagination was evil continually. Now, keep this thought in mind as we develop this message. A preoccupation with the demonic, as the days of Noah were. We're not children of darkness. We're children of light. And a careful study of the days of Noah will reveal to us exactly where we are on the prophetic calendar. No man knows the day or the hour, but God said we could know the season. According to Jesus, the first civilization was a pattern for all future civilizations. Ours will and has passed through the give-ups of God as it moves down the road to judgment. In preceding messages, we've demonstrated as a civilization, we're well past the third and final give-up of God. His judgment is next. We know much concerning the days of Noah. It was a day of violence, a day of perversion, a day when men did not want to retain God in their knowledge. Thinking themselves wise, they become fools. God became the tool for gaining their own selfish desires. Now, when all the facts of Noah's day are put together, they tell one story, namely, we are reliving those days in this 21st century. According to Jesus Christ himself, this marks the end. Now, one major characteristic of Noah's day was the imagination was evil continually. The most powerful component of the human is the imagination. The imagination, that is the creative, the artistic, the very soul of the individual. This is the most powerful force in the human. Now, when the imagination is evil, society as a whole becomes evil. In Noah's day, the imagination was evil continually, all the time, day and night, year in, year out. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the thoughts were X-rated. The imagination was anti-God. God, if thought of at all, was only the means of self-realization. Now, today's theology is as Noah's day. If you want a bigger house, a better job, get God. God has once more, in the end of this age, become the ticket to achieve our selfish desires. Such unholy thought of God is born of an evil imagination. They did not like to retain God in their knowledge. They became their own God, worshiping and serving the creature more than the Creator. Now, the antediluvians were the first humanists. The same spirit prevails in our schools and in much of today's theology. The purpose of hell then and now was to change society through the children. 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, the young are fed the lie that they must save themselves. A casual look of this generation that has grown up under such a philosophy reveals that the Bible has become an outdated book in their thinking. Man's thoughts are born in his imagination. The artistic, the creative, all flow from the imagination. As a man thinks, so is that man. Man individually is a product of his own imagination, and the thinking of society as a whole always mirrors the future. You can know what tomorrow is by what that society is thinking today. If the imagination is corrupt, then the world that generation produces will be a corrupt world. Man-made in the image of God, even in his fallen state, is creative. Look at the automobile, the color television. Man created these marvels. In that sense, man still resembles the image of God. For that reason, when a nation subscribes to universal entropy, that nation commits suicide. God is a creator, and man must ever be encouraged to create. Now, the New Age movement has all the characteristics of Antichrist and has set for its goal zero population growth. This is also the goal of much political thinking, especially the liberal element of our society. The thought is there's not enough food for everybody, so we must reduce the number of people on the planet. Now, that kind of thinking was born in hell. We're not running out of food. We're not running out of energy. And the devil, with a handful of people, must not be allowed to sell this lie to mankind. When man first discovered coal, the fearful and unbelieving tried to block its use. Again, with the discovery of oil, the same fearful spirit attempted to prevent its use. Now, we're on the threshold of unlimited energy and the use of nuclear, and again, the sounds of fear are heard. Man must create if he's to continue to exist. If we buy the theory of universal entropy, we have bought the Antichrist. Man is a product of his imagination. Corrupt this imagination, and you corrupt his world, because he will produce the kind of world that he imagines. Now, Satan, knowing this, has filled our society with pornography. The thinking of society mirrors the future. I can tell you tomorrow will be a demon-possessed world, because that is the thinking of man today. When I was a boy, a Frankenstein movie. I saw a Frankenstein movie. Now, the horror of the movie was the mad doctor took the heart out of one man and put it in another. That isn't Frankenstein stuff today. There are people all over this country with somebody else's heart inside of them. That movie was a mirror telling us what the future would be. As a boy, 10 or 12 years old, I traveled this universe with Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. Planet travel, when I was a boy, was comic book stuff. But it's not comic book stuff today. It has become a reality. Those comic book stories mirrored our day. In the late 50s and early 60s, the television shows Bewitched and I Dream of Jenny became very popular. Millions of Americans roared with laughter watching these witches perform. But nobody is laughing at witchcraft today. With over 11 million devil worshippers in America and human sacrifice on the rise, Bewitched and I Dream of Jenny were mirroring the world of witchcraft that was coming to curse the nation. In the 60s, our streets became filled with boys who looked like girls and girls who looked like boys. This was a forerunner of the homosexual spirit that has become the nation's #1 problem. Much of today's movie and television production has to do with the occult. Everywhere there is this fascination with the demonic. The imagination of the world is set on spiritism. People who 50 years ago denied the supernatural of the Bible are now turning to spiritism, seances, target cards, Ouija boards, palm readers, trying to find an answer to life. All of this preoccupation with the demonic says, in no uncertain terms, that tomorrow's world will be demon-possessed. God is going to turn this earth over to the devil for 7 years. Ladies and gentlemen, hell is going to control. If you miss the rapture, you'll find yourself in a totally demon-possessed world. Now, it is not an accident that the movies like Rosemary's Baby and The Devil Within Her, Behind the Door, are coming out in our time. They mirror the future. It isn't going to get better. It will get progressively worse. Your only hope is to be a part of that raptured church. The judgment of God is about to be outpoured. When wickedness reached a certain level in those antediluvian days, when the cup of iniquity was full, God utterly, completely destroyed that civilization. God has no problem with the devil or his demons, but he never moves until the cup of iniquity is full. Moses was not allowed to destroy the Amorites until the cup of iniquity was full. This world's cup of iniquity is about full, and God is going to destroy the system. How can we know when it's full? Well, the Bible said men love darkness rather than light because their days are evil. Now, as long as that is true, that is actually, man is saying that God is holy and I'm a sinner. And as long as man attempts to hide his wickedness from God, then that cup of iniquity is not full. But when man, like today, when the homosexuality, a homosexual rather parades his homosexuality, when we have president going to a gay parade, when all of this becomes open and defies God, that world's cup of iniquity is full. I can tell you, judgment has already been pronounced. The wrath of God always follows. In 1 hour, Babylon will be destroyed. The church is about to be removed, and the wrath of God poured out on this rebellious planet. What we see in the physical world says in clear language, a demon-possessed world is just around the corner. I've watched this. In the 50s, after World War II, Mr. Eisenhower, the president, there's a great time of calm and peace in America. We were building our freeways, moving toward a better world. Then came rock music in the 60s, and with that music came the violence of drugs, awful time of drugs and violence. Then the 70s came the pill, and following that, a promiscuous age that led to divorce and venereal disease on a plane unheard of in the human race. Then come the 80s with the homosexual spirit coming out and more being pronounced. Then the 90s with what we have now as the demonized time of men looking into witchcraft to look at their future, the come, that demonic time when our children now are looking for their future in the palm readers and the target cards. All of this shows us a movement toward a world that's just around the corner. In days prior to the flood, men become strangely fascinated with the demonic, just as we are today. Having rejected God, they probed the world of spiritism, seeking answers to life. You'd be surprised how many politicians in Washington, D.C. are going to the witches of Endor looking for answers. The occult world has come to influence Washington. The antediluvians, with their fascination and involvement with demons, left God no alternative but to destroy them. The involvement with the occult, the perversion that was so rampant, called for the judgment of God. This generation now living is absolutely repeating the days of Noah, and the only thing holding back God's wrath is the true church of the Lord Jesus Christ. When it is removed, judgment will come, as the days of Noah were. The rejection of light leads to darkness. The false always follow the false. A few years ago, the Wall Street Journal carried an article about religion that produced no change with the morals of a nation. Unlike the revivals of the past that radically changed society, the present revival never even changed the people involved in it. Now, when I read the article, I said, can it be true that a secular newspaper writer knows more about revival than the average preacher knows today? The painful answer had to be yes. As I thought on this, I asked the question, why, with so much religion, are we so ineffective? The answer I arrived at was simply this: the church has lost the radical ability to confront. Today, when faced with the impossible, she turns a shade of gray and becomes a part of the scene. One preacher told me the church he pastored was in an area dominated by the Church of Christ. Instead of confronting them, he said, I majored in the area in which we agreed. They came to believe that we were the same as they. When those first preachers came out of that upper room, nobody believed that they were the same as those around them. Rome had 1,000 gods and welcomed the competition of other gods. But when they hit the streets of Jerusalem, they never threw Jesus in the arena to compete. Their message was, there is no God but our God. There was no compromise with the false. Not for 1 minute did they allow that false religion to believe that two of them could mix or coexist. They shouted in the streets of the city, there's no other name under heaven whereby we must be saved. Today, the church, for the most part, has lost the ability to confront. We must once more remind ourselves that the rejection of light leads to darkness, even in religious circles. This fascination with darkness in Noah's day led to the union of the human and the demonic. In the book of Genesis, you have this. The sons of God, fallen angels, married the daughters of men. Genesis 6:2 and 4. The theologians have attempted to explain this away because he does not believe in spirits. Most Bible schools in the study of psychology make man bipartite, soul and body, refusing to allow man a spirit. The reason is obvious. If you allow spirit in the human, you must throw out the theory of evolution, because spirit is not matter. Man's spirit came not by an act of creation, by an act of procreation. God breathed into man, and that man became a living soul. Now, when speaking of the daughters of men marrying the sons of God, to remove the supernatural, the theologian interprets the daughters of men as daughters of the godly line of Seth. Now, the Bible is against such interpretation. The daughters of men here, spoken of in the Scripture, are unregenerate women. They're those who have these sons of God to be fallen angels, demons, who were able to take on human form. I leave that to others. What I do know is you have a mixture here of the true and the false that produced a generation that hated God and corrupted the earth. Without moral restraint, these strange creatures glorified corruption. As the days of Noah were, ours also is a morally bankrupt generation. A society void of conviction and completely self-seeking. Mothers will leave their children. Fathers will leave their wife and children because they restrict their lifestyle. Without natural affection, implacable, fierce, void of any sense of right and wrong, and strangely fascinated with the demonic, America is seeing her children cursed. 1954, while conducting meetings in Houston, Texas, I went into one of the low-rent housing projects to speak with parents about getting their children in Sunday school. I found children left to themselves while parents worked. When the parents left in the morning, they locked those children out of their apartments. These children, some of them only 3 and 4 years old, were caricatures of old men and women. They were no longer little children. 3 and 4 year old children cursed me using the most vulgar language. There was no question in my mind these children were demon possessed. When I would speak of God, they would laugh and curse. Neurological centers are filled with children with all kinds of mental disturbances. Suicide is the #1 killer of teenagers around the world. That's demonic. Noah's day is being relived. This fascination with Satan has produced a strange world. It's not uncommon to read of a child murdering his or her parents. The devil is a murderer. Once a human is possessed of a demon, they take on their traits. Thousands of children are alcoholic, drug addicts when they're born. Many children are born with strange behavior that cannot be attributed to retardation. Tests show these children to be brilliant, yet they have disturbances that the doctor cannot explain. We're witnessing a union of the human and the demonic, producing a demon-possessed generation. These agents of hell cannot take on human form, but they can possess human beings. When they possess a human, that person becomes exactly like the spirit that possessed him. When a murdering spirit possesses a person, that person becomes a murderer. When asked why they kill, they cannot explain. They have become like the demon. Demon-possessed parents can produce demon-possessed offspring. It's a known fact that an alcoholic usually comes from a long line of alcoholics. That demon got in generations back, and all along the line he comes out. Man's fascination with the occult has set him on a course of destruction. A Frankenstein world is in the making. Man's course is downward and leads to a total alienation from God. The program, the machinery, the spirit of Antichrist are present now, this moment. The tools are available to make the earth a prison. The behavioral engineers have come with their mind-modifying drugs and electronic devices. They've come as the saviors of the human race, claiming the ability to tame the beast in man and empty the prisons. The truth is, they plan to make the world a prison. And if you believe it's going to be otherwise, you've deceived yourself. There's one hope, and that is to apprehend that for which you have been apprehended for. Be a part of that raptured church. The program only awaits the man of sin, the Antichrist. Many Antichrist spirits have gone out, but there's coming a personal Antichrist who will dominate every person left on this earth. He, Antichrist, will not worry whether you like the way he runs the world. He'll merely modify your behavior so that you will adjust to what you hate. His mind-modifying drugs do nothing to relieve the stress. They merely help you to adapt to it. All dictators, from Nebuchadnezzar to Stalin, destroyed their enemies. If you agreed with Nebuchadnezzar, your head came off. If Stalin didn't like the way you act, he killed you. But the Antichrist will simply declare you sick, dose you with drugs that'll make you tractable. One says, if I miss the rapture, I'll refuse the mark of the beast. If you miss the rapture, you will already be marked. That selfish spirit that kept you from walking with God in the first place is the nature of that beast. In the second place, when you refuse, you'll find yourself in a mental hospital, dosed with drugs to a point that you'll do whatever they want. Antichrist will make a robot out of anyone who does not agree with him. Challenge the system, and the system will change your personality. I believe with everything within me, Antichrist is alive on this earth, waiting his moment in history. The end is close. Several years ago, the atomic scientists moved the clock to 4 minutes to midnight. With that move, they said the earth is within 4 years of a nuclear holocaust. They believe that from the facts they have before him. If the machinery is in place, surely the man is not far behind. Big Brother has come. Men and women outside of Christ are about to be rounded up and forever made a part of a lost world. He causeth all to receive a mark in their right hand and in their forehead. In the Iron Curtain world, for a man to work, he had to agree with that Antichrist system. His right hand is marked. If he doesn't work, he cannot buy and sell. The intellectual in the Soviet Union must agree or he cannot work. His forehead is being stamped. The Antichrist will have no problem branding those whose nature has been conditioned. Selfishness, the mark of Cain, mark of a religious age, coming into focus as a product of man's fascination with demons, is a demon-possessed world. In Noah's day, man was so evil, the only remedy was the flood. Only 8 souls escaped. Judgment followed the reprobate mind. Before judgment came to the antediluvians, God removed his own. As in the days of Noah were, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Before his judgment falls on this wicked age, God will again move his own. Judgment will not be the fire of Sodom or the flood of Noah's day. Judgment will be what the Bible calls the Great Tribulation. In the hour you think not, the Son of Man will come.